defenders, I think it's like
Are we live? Of course we're live. People, deluded. I'm back again. I've got a special guest that lives over in the stateside. He's a fantastic, stats man. He's got fantastic opinions on the Arsenal Vision podcast. Scott, I'm very happy to have you. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing good. That was a very kind introduction.
I loved it. It's the truth, man. If he wasn't any of that, I wouldn't say anything. And like I just said off topic with you, like I said, I really rate your opinions. So it's a chance to really pick your brains and just see where you're at with Arsenal. So yeah, I want to kick straight off. What did you think of last season?
I think it kind of met my expectations. So I try to start the season really trying to write down, almost even on paper, what do I want to see for an expected, what I think is a good performance. And I wanted to see growth in the team. I wanted our team to look at times like it was on the right path for being able to challenge for the top four. But in my mind, top four was still kind of a stretch goal. So I wanted to get back to Europe. I wanted the team to look like it was performing better. So I think overall, I generally think that the team met my expectations. Fifth place was a little bit of a disappointment with how close it seemed like at times we were to, getting back to the Champions League. But I tried not to change the goalposts in the middle of the season about what I thought would be a successful season. I know some people, will change that depending on how they think things are going. But that's really my philosophy is, all right, let's stick to our goals that we laid out at the beginning of the season and really make those our successful. So I think, if it would have been anything more than that, I would have been over the moon excited, but just a little disappointed, that we were, kind of almost had that. But I think still overall a good season for Arsenal last year.
I mean, you said it there, Scott, and I agree with what you said. That obviously when we started the season, even the most optimistic of Arsenal fan would not be talking about Champions League. The way it ended was upsetting. Fifth is just about right in Europa League. I don't want to use the word failure, but, you mentioned goalpost changing, and you're right. You set out a task in August. You need to see it through to May. Wouldn't you consider that goalposts do change in the season though? Because I mean, there was a year Leicester, I'm sure in August, they didn't expect to win the league title, and then they obviously found themselves able to take advantage of a situation. So just to play devil's advocate, would you argue that in sport, football is always changing and it's always ever changing, and you have to adapt accordingly?
I mean, so I think it depends again on what you're saying is success versus not success, right? You can come away feeling happy or relieved, right? But kind of like how you've had the season. So I would kind of turn this question around and think, did Everton have a successful season? I would say 100% no. Are their fans relieved and happy that they were able to kind of get out of the relegation fight and zone and do that? Yeah, they probably were. They didn't go down. They were, celebrating on that last day because they had achieved safety. So I think that those are kind of two different questions. So you have set goals at the beginning of the season, and those are really kind of what kind of makes things successful or not. But then how you kind of feel at the end of the season really goes with the bumps and, the tips and turns and everything that goes around in the season really kind of, I guess affects your mood for how you feel it went.
You're right there. And would you say, again, we know what Champions League would have done for us in terms of potentially bringing in players or whatnot. Would you say it was a missed opportunity to potentially accelerate our project? Because like you kind of put, we're probably on course with what we set out to do from last summer and what we're doing now. If we got it, in your opinion, was it a chance of maybe going after players had we have got Champions League that we might not have got? Could we have accelerated the project in all aspects? Or is it just, it wouldn't have really made a difference for you?
I think I might have said last year that, that might make us miss out on some players missing out on the Champions League. But now that I've kind of seen a lot of our business and I'm like, honestly, I'm very surprised by the total spend kind of that's already gone through. I'm kind of inclined to say that the evidence says that we haven't missed out on anybody by not being in the Champions League this year. I mean, I think we're getting Jesus, who looks like an absolute phenomenal signing. I thought maybe that's a guy who wants to stay in the Champions League and wouldn't come to Arsenal without that, but we did get him. Same thing with Zinchenko. Getting Vieira, I think that was a cool, interesting buy, one for the future, one to be able to do some of those things. And bringing back William Saliba, I thought maybe he would push things for a little bit more to not want to come to Arsenal, where some of his minutes might not be coming in the Champions
And his
League. Right?
loan club's in the Champions League. They qualified for that. That's
Exactly.
a great point, man.
But yeah, so I think the evidence suggests that it hasn't hurt the team in their ability to recruit players. So I think that's still a good thing that our brand is strong. I think that you can see, or at least players can see what the plan is and the project is, right? Because I think, that's one of the things I think Edu really kind of did with his last interview, was really kind of put that out into the media, into the agents, and to the players, really trying to sell that to them, that this is what Arsenal is doing and this is where we're going. Because I think, people that follow on a daily basis understand, kind of what the plan was.
Yeah.
But, getting that out into the media, getting that to agents and other players who don't necessarily follow Arsenal on a day-to-day basis, I think that's something that's really important. I think that they've done a really good job of being able to sell the team to players. And yeah, I'm quite pleasantly surprised that it hasn't seemed to have hurt our ability to go out and recruit.
I agree, man. That's a fantastic point. So would you say that, maybe last season, like you said, those that were following, you could kind of see what was happening. It wasn't necessarily blatantly evident, but you could see what was happening. Would you say now that it's quite clear what Arsenal want to do and it's quite clear what this process is? And I'm not necessarily referring to Arsenal fans that obviously indulge in this. I'm more or less to just the casual football fan. Do you think that you can see more clarity across all aspects of the club now?
Yeah, and I think so, right? Because I think you could see last year, especially once you kind of got past December, so that January to March frame, where there was a system in place where I think you could see how Arteta wanted to build and how he wanted his team to attack. And I think that was something that was really positive. And I think one of the things that I've kind of gleaned from the preseason matches is that we're now adding additional options, ways to change it. I think that's one of the things that we've also done this season is really prioritize kind of like hybrid players that have the option to play in multiple positions. And it's not really so much of a trade-off for them to be able to do it, right? You see Jesus is comfortable up front and on, playing on the wings. Yeah. I think Eddie Nketiah brought that into his game where he's comfortable doing a little bit of both of those too. Facts. Zinchenko, playing a little midfield, being able to play a little left back. I think White last season, right? He's a center back, but he's also comfortable playing right back, as we've seen him look really, really impressive in these last couple of preseason games. And I think Saliba has those as well. So I think that's something that this team is building towards, where we're able to, we have a one set style of play, but now we're adding layers onto it where, with being able to take advantage of like a 5 substitution world where we can bring one player in and now we're able to switch into something completely different. It's still the same kind of fundamentals beyond it, but it's a new problem for a team to have to go solve for. So I think that's kind of where you've been able to see the evolution of this team over the last year.
Would you say you feel a lot more comfortable in that regards because of, I don't want to say caliber of player, but caliber of player, football IQ of the player? Because I feel previous years we've had players that quote unquote can claim that they can play multiple roles, but it looks like square pegs in round holes.
Yes.
Like you said, we've got Jesus, we've got Zinchenko, you've got Ben White, you've got Tomiyasu, who isn't fit. Tierney can even play a couple of defensive positions, and Odegaard and Smith Rowe and the rest of them. And for me, what gives me what I really like is that these individuals are actually very good at it. So do you feel you'll see more versatility from Arteta? Because some of his critics, and I'm not necessarily one of them, would say at times, more like the end of the season, we could have switched to a back 5. Sometimes we could have rotated in or out. Do you feel with what appears like a stronger squad developing, you might see those things?
Yeah, so this is something that I've been sort of developing in my mind. I think I was talking with Pedro, who's on Le Grove. And I think one of the things that I've seen from this team, especially in our squad building, is that our backup players aren't really backup players like in the traditional number 2 sense. I've been calling them what I call 1B players. So they are players that you still feel comfortable when they get on the pitch. They're able to, provide something or maybe change the game and to do something a little bit different than your number 1 guys, but they're not the same number 2, very clearly backup players that we had before. Right. I think the clear examples of that would be, like a Cedric type player, right? So Cedric is fine. He can do a job. But nobody would be like, yeah, well, in this right situations, he's the right guy for this. Yeah, but I think that you kind of look up and down our team now, and we're getting those types of players as our backup. he's a 1B, right? I see that the left-hand side, the left back as a great example of this, right? I think there'll be certainly times where we'll have a game that suits Tierney more, and he's going to be the guy that comes in there. A guy, he's probably a much more solid defender. Does a lot more of the classic overlap and get out to the wing and put it across from the byline type of player.
More the status quo sort of fullback stuff. You're
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there'll be times where, we want more control. And so we'll bring in a Zinchenko, and he's a guy that's going to be more of a midfielder type, situation where he's going to be progressing the ball more from the half spaces rather from the wide spots. But I think there's times and space for both of those players to be able to do it.
So
and I think that. Yeah. So I think it's just a great, right? So it's like we have players that are both good, but that have slightly different interpretations of the role that they're going to be given. So that's going to be something that, Arteta's going to have the ability to mix and match and be able to do that. So I think there's, a lot more of that in our, just team. I think there's really only just a couple positions now where it really feels like we are, really kind of down to one player. And I think, really the one that kind of jumps out is, Thomas Partey at that number 6 role. There really isn't another backup for that, we feel super comfortable with. But I think, we have 10 players now in the other spots that I feel really kind of comfortable with the guy that would be backing them up.
And I share your opinion because I do think fans kind of comprehend it, but they don't really understand how much of a bigger squad you need, especially if you aspire to get anywhere one day near City and Liverpool. Like you mentioned, it's almost 1Bs. It's players that can take spots, but they've got different strengths. And as you know, variety is the spice of life, essentially. And I do like that we've got a strong squad. Again, an Arsenal tax, we get a lot of injuries, and a big part as to why we didn't get Champions League was obviously the drop-off, as you mentioned, with a couple of players. And also what gives me a lot of confidence is the profile of these players. These players, a bit like Arteta, they're young and hungry and keen to prove themselves. I can't say that's always been the case of players that were previously here, and actually players that Arteta's previously brought in. So kind of keeping up the theme with the transfer market and things, what would you say concerns you at this moment in time? Because we can only comment on the business we've done for all the rumors and that. What concerns you? What excites you? What's your feelings on the business we've done? You've kind of alluded to Jesus and Zinchenko, but let me know your thoughts, man.
All right. Well, I'm going to go straight into what concerns me because I think that's always the most fun to talk about.
Bad news first,
I think the biggest weakness that I think I still see in the squad is probably just depth at the attacking midfield positions. It's not that I think that we have some very good players here, but like you just mentioned, right? Like we're going to have an extra 8 to 10 matches this year with the Europa League. And that's going to maybe tax some of the players that we have right now. I don't want Saka playing 36 league matches again. I think that, that really just hurt his ability down the stretch. I think, we talked about, right. Because it's like, he just looked dead on his feet, like, after 60 minutes of a match. And so I would like to have a player that we, trust to be able to come on and be able to spell him and get him down to like 32 league matches instead of basically running out every single match. Right. Yeah. Guys that, if some of our young players aren't quite at the levels that they need to be, right. Cause that's slumps happen with young players. Tough, it's a tough, to, demand that from players that are in their early 20s. So having a guy, who's been there, done that kind of thing. And I think that was kind of the idea behind Rafinha and why, we chased him. It wasn't because he was replacing anybody or doing anything like that, but it was just we really did need additional, trusted
needed more quality, man, in my opinion,
right?
In those areas. Facts.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if we end up with like someone like Nicolas Pepe staying around, he could potentially do it, but I think there's just the evidence shows that he's not a Mikel Arteta style player. And it's not to say that he's a bad player. I just think that it wasn't the right match between the club and the player and the club. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and like he'd probably go find somewhere else. And I wish that him the best, and I think he could go excel in a team that's a little bit more counterattacking or somewhere a little bit more space for him to be able to go do that. But it just hasn't worked out for Arsenal. So I think that's my main concern is, do we have enough depth at the attacking midfield to be able to get the goals and be able to get the performances that we need? Other than that, I think that this transfer window has been exceptional. It's really blown my expectations out of the water.
I think everyone, man.
Right? Yeah. And it's like, I was always a huge Jesus fan, and just watching him in preseason, has just been like
It's
eye-opening.
electrifying.
Yeah, like right. It's like every time he touches the ball, it looks like something good is happening. He just looks like he's on a different level of what we're doing. And I think that's important to have that in the team, right?
Facts.
Because it's now everyone else is going to go out there to try to match what he's able to do. And yeah, and I think you could see Odegaard becoming just starting to get on that same wavelength with him, like, be able to start feeding in some through balls and being able to do that, right? And I think we're
Facts.
getting some good connections with him, Saka, Odegaard on that right-hand channel. And it's just like, man, I'm just so excited. I think Zinchenko will be a really interesting player. I've loved having Saliba reintegrated back into the team too, right?
You're
Because
not
that's
alone in
one
that
that,
fact,
it's not a signing, but him getting back into the team feels like that classic, oh, it's like a new signing, because that
Yes.
kid is so good. He is just like, when he goes up against another player, he just has the kind of that cool, arrogant confidence almost to him. It's like, you're not going to get past me. I got this. And
Facts.
yeah, his passing has been good. So no, I think it's just been. I don't have really any complaints about this the transfer window if it ends today as it is. I mean, yeah, there's always concerns. You can always get more, but no, if this was the way things ended going into the season, I'd feel pretty good.
So where would that place you in terms of outgoings then?
I think there's a lot of outgoings,
Easier
right?
said than done, I know.
There's a lot of guys that are, kind of biding their time. And I think this is going to be an interesting one, like the last couple of windows where it really kind of takes you to the end of the window to kind of see some of the transfer window get unclogged. I think this is also going to be an interesting wrinkle where, so many of the leagues are starting next weekend or
Yeah, man,
weekend
it's
after
all
next,
showtime next weekend, bro.
less than 10 days. So there's going to be like 4 or 5 matches for a lot of these teams to kind of get a take of, oh crap, I might be in big trouble and I need to go get somebody new in. So I think that we're going to see a flurry of activity in like that last week of the transfer window as teams really kind of get a sense of where they are in the league after they've seen a few matches. I think we're going to see some sales and everything go through where it'll kind of get some money flowing in the system again, and teams really able to go again. So I think that Arsenal will be able to offload. I don't know if we'll be able to sell any of these players so much for more than nominal fees, but I think that a lot of these players will end up finding new homes by September 1st.
Is there any of the players that the Pepes, the Torreiras, the Ainsleys, the Nelsons, the list, Leno, the list goes on? Is there any that, without all the stuff that has nothing to do with football off the field, is there any that you would make a case to keep if you could in an ideal world? Is there anyone that you think could actually offer something to the squad?
I think I would point to the attacking midfielder. So I think that if we really needed to, and if we're not able to get anybody new in, I think I would, seriously consider Nelson and Pepe as guys to keep around. I think Nelson, minutes for the Europa League, some of these cup games, I think that would be a really good opportunity for him, because he's still a guy that, he came with a big pedigree of, potential coming up through, the likes with, Sancho and everything like that in the England setup, it was supposed to be on par with those guys. And I think that there's still flashes of that in his game when he's playing. He scored a really good goal in preseason on a cutback from the Saka one. So I think that, he's still a player that has potential. So I wouldn't necessarily sell him for nothing. So I think that's a guy that I would keep along. And then I think Pepe still has just talent that really, like, it's pretty unique among the Arsenal squad that would be hard to replace. It's like, I totally agree that I don't think he necessarily fits well with how we'd like to be on a long term, but I think he's still, like, if there's one guy, you stick him on a bench, you're down a goal and you need 20 minutes,
do something magical,
right? He's a guy that can potentially do something, right? So those are the two guys that I think that if we're at the end of the window and there's not really offers that make a ton of sense out there for him, that I think would be guys that I would kind of keep around. Everybody else, I'm kind of indifferent for. I feel bad for Ainsley Maitland-Niles a little bit, because I think that, right? Because it's like, I thought when he was playing fullback, there was flashes of a guy that this guy could start for, an upper half team. But when he plays midfield, it's like, I think he's like
lost,
champion. It's like he's a championship level player almost. Like he doesn't have it anymore. So it's like, that's one where I feel a little bit disappointed. It's like what could have been if he had decided to stay as a fullback, because I think he could have been a good player. Lucas Torreira is a guy that I really like statistically, what he's able to potentially bring, but I just feel like that one is just too far gone. Like the player is basically saying, no, I'm not coming back. And I think he would rather just literally sit out than come back to London
and come back. Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And then the rest, who else is really kind of, I think Leno is pretty much out, right?
Got one foot out the door though, man.
yeah. He's pretty much on his way to Fulham. So I think that one's pretty much sealed. Yeah. I mean, everybody else. Yeah, Pablo Mari.
Oh yeah, I mean, pretty standard with these sort of players, man.
Right, yeah, right. You maybe go on a loan to Turkey, do something like that. That seems about the right level for him. So yeah, there's no one else on that team that I would make a case for keeping around beyond. Yeah, you just couldn't get him out.
I think you said it there. Obviously, as someone that is over in the stateside, what do you make of Matt Turner?
I think that, his first preseason games were, I think, a little bit of nerves, right? You're making an impression. I think the first one, the against Nuremberg, he kind of let in one goal that I think he probably would have liked to have, had another chance at.
Yeah.
Some of his stuff in the States, I think that's coming back to America, being able to, being in front of home fans, doing those things. So I think as he settled down a little bit, I think he's looked better. I'm still excited for him. America has a reputation of producing good goalkeepers, and I think that
long may it continue for us, man.
Right? Yeah, so I think he's got the potential to be able to do that. He's an excellent shot stopper. I do have some questions sometimes about his ability to kick the ball, but one of the things I actually saw was his throwing. I thought that was actually
very good in his last game, to be
right.
fair.
Yeah, he had a couple where he threw it out there 45 yards, and
wow, where have you been
right? Yeah, so maybe he doesn't just need to kick the ball; he just needs to throw the ball more often. But no, I think he's going to be a perfectly serviceable number 2. I don't know if he's necessarily going to overtake Ramsdale or anything like that, but I don't think that was ever the intent of the deal to bring him in. So, but yeah, I think he'll get some Europa League and some cup games, and I think he'll look just fine. I don't think anybody's going to complain about him. He's not going to be an Alex Runerson type guy or anything like that.
I think he'll be all right, man. I really like his enthusiasm with how he talks about integrating with Rob Holding, moving to England. I'm rooting for him because he feels like a bit of a fan, and that's all. You always want to see them do well. I agree with you. There probably was a bit of nerves, probably a bit overawed because he signed for Arsenal. Obviously, the training level, there's a significant uptick with being in an English club in the MLS. So I think we've got to give him a couple of months, but he seems like a good guy as long as he can push Ramsdale. And if anything, God forbid, happens to Ramsdale, he can obviously come into the team. I don't think there'll be any issues with him.
Right. I think he could be a perfectly safe pair of hands, right? That comes in, if you need it, right. And I think that's what you want from your backup goalkeeper is a solid,
just reliable, man.
Right. Yeah. Solid shot stopper. Don't, let in the easy ones. Right. And then let the guys in front of you. Right. Because that's what we have now. We have a number of good ball progressors in front of our goalkeeper. So yeah, it's a bonus what Aaron Ramsdale can do with the ball at his feet. But I think if we had to, rely on Matt Turner, I think it would just make the simple, easy passes to the guys in front of you, and then try to keep the ball out of the net. And I think I want
to ask you about Marquinhos, just because it's just hit me now. We spoke about Pepe, we briefly spoke on Nelson. It's not that we haven't seen him, but we haven't really seen him, and I don't know what to make. Is he gonna stay for the first 6 months? Maybe go on loan in Jan? Is Arteta making a late decision on how he trains? What do you think we're doing with him?
Right. I think that's a good way, right? I don't know, right? I thought my initial thought with the signing is that he was going to kind of to be a Hutchison change in the under 21s. I thought that was kind of going to be his initial thing. Like he comes in, trains with the first team, maybe gets some appearances on, the cups or the Europa League, right? Like maybe he's a sub at the Europa League team, but primarily, just gets acquainted to English football, playing the under 21s. I think that's kind of my expectation, but maybe he's a Martinelli type, right?
I hope so.
Right? Like Martinelli had those same kind of expectations coming in, and then he got thrust in and really just kind of exploded it and hasn't looked back since. So I think that would be the best case. But I think the more realistic case is, he maybe gets some sub minutes in the cups, looks to get acquainted to England in the under 21s.
What do you make of our midfield? Because I feel, that depending on who you are, the word Granit Xhaka is either going to make you excited or you want to throw everything round in your house. I don't think he's as good as his fanboys make out. I definitely don't think he's a terrible player like some of the scapegoats. I just feel I like his mentality. I like how he is off the field. I like his durability. I think he is a decent player. He's just not necessarily of that ilk. And when you've got him and you've got Partey, where Partey's a quality player, but if he's not fit, it's a problem. When you're betting on that midfield, as much as I like it, and when it's there, it kind of works, I don't quite think it's good enough. And I think it's a bit of a ticking time bomb. So yeah, a bit of a double-edged question. That in relation to how you feel on them two. And what do you make of the links with Telemans?
All right. So yeah, talking Jacket. So I think you pretty much nailed it, right? He's not as bad as the haters say, but he's not quite as good as the fanboys say. I think the truth lies in the middle. I think he's a very consistently good but not great midfielder.
Yeah, not
all right. I mean, yeah, you kind of look at that. He's a step below probably the absolute elite guys, but he looks comfortable whenever this team has been at that level. So I don't think he's necessarily a player that holds Arsenal back. I did used to say that I thought that he kind of limited the ceiling of the team, but that's when things were really built around him. But now that he seems to be more like a secondary guy in the midfield, and I think now things are built more around Thomas Partey, I think that limiting factor is a little bit less. So to me, it's like he's a guy that is always available, and I think that's something that we
very underrated
a little. Yeah, discount way too heavily. Like this is a guy that just like never gets injured. I'm gonna knock on wood here, but he is always available. He never he doesn't have too many 4 out of 10 performances. He'll occasionally do a 5 or a 6 or have something stupid and get a red card. But he's usually a guy that's kind of dependable. He's going to do his Granit Xhaka things. He's going to have a couple really pretty passes that he's able to do. Really help
the nail on the head, man.
Right? Yeah, progress the ball up the field quite well. Kind of do maybe a dumb foul, something that puts Arsenal in a little bit of trouble. But that's just kind of who he is right now. It's we've had 5 years of seeing him do this. So it's there really isn't any surprises left with Granit Xhaka. He just kind of is what he is, and he's a good but not great player. Who's always available. And I don't know, that kind of works out to a person that I don't mind having in the team. I do like that we are now adding additional players that seem to make our reliance on him more minimal, I suppose. So that I think that is something that I think the team is being able to do better with. So if he stays with there, I used to be I absolutely want him out, but now I'm right? If he's our third midfielder, that's perfect, right? Yeah. So yeah, no. And then you asked about Tielemans. I've always, again, I think Tielemans, when I kind of looked at the beginning of the season, what Arsenal needed to do, I looked at that left 8 spot as something that we needed to improve on. And, he seemed like a guy that was available at a reasonable fee that could accomplish that quite well. But now after watching a bit of preseason, I'm a little less sold that we have to go for that. And I think there might be other bigger needs that I think that the team needs to do. So if Arsenal do bring in Tielemans, I'd be very happy with him because I think it's hard to get a good Premier League player for that kind of value anymore, right? Because
it's a lot of upside as well, with Jesus and Odegaard. You're right, man.
Right. So I think that would be a perfectly good signing. I think that he would help the team a lot. But I think we're able to now develop a few more players in that left 8. I think Sambi has shown a few flashes of being able to look good quite there. Granit Xhaka continues to just play, not necessarily excellent there, but, good enough.
Plays well there, yeah.
Right. And I think that, if we're kind of looking at a landing spot, Smith Rowe potentially, I think, if I was his, agent, I'd be that's the area that you could go make your own. Emil.
I'd say Martin Odegaard could do that as well, and obviously you got Fabio Vieira.
Yeah,
and Zinchenko. It's crazy.
Yeah, so to me, it's that's a spot that I think we've filled up pretty well, where Tielemans doesn't seem like quite the pressing concern that he was at the start of the transfer window.
So if I looked at it, and it kind of, we're kind of doing full circle because I know you kind of touched on Partey being injured. So based on just what you've said, then I'm not saying that you're obviously ruling out Telemans and people of that ilk, but is it fair to say you're more pressed on if you could sign that, more of a direct Partey replacement? Because I know Lokonga's been played as a forward 8, he can play as a 6. El Nene's got a new deal. I don't know where you're at in terms of if their ability to fill the void. We know it's not going to quite be Partey, but would you more go for that 6, that defensive mid, that box-to-box physical figure then, as opposed to another left-sided 8?
I mean, to me, like, that's one that if you're gonna go and get a 6, it has to be like probably almost like a signing for like the full starting role. I think that would be a really hard one.
Way better than what we have.
Right? Yeah, it's like I don't think that you can go get a backup that will play at the same or to give you the same qualities that Thomas Partey does. Like, it's just that is just a pretty rare talent that you're not going to be able to get a guy say, all right, well, I'm going to give you like 1,000 minutes this year, and you're going to be okay with that, right? That's a really hard sell, right? That's a really hard sell to make. So I think if we do end up with a Partey injury, heaven forbid, I think what we'll see is, again, like leaning more into some of our hybrid players. I think we'll see a slight adjustment to the system. Maybe it'll be more of a double pivot instead of a single pivot. Maybe it's moving to a bit of a back 3 where we are looking for a lot more from, going a 3 center backs, right? Go with White and Saliba, being able to do more of those progressive numbers that are, Partey's able to do now. So I think that is something that we're trying to do to make ourselves a little less fragile to an injury there. I think, if it's a 1 or 2 games, right? I think El Neni is a perfectly fine number 2 there. It's a guy that we don't feel comfortable and happy starting, but he can
do a job.
Right. We've seen him go in there and play respectable, it's
5 out of 10, man, is all we're asking for when that
right.
job.
Yeah, it's like we've seen him do it, right? We saw him do it at the end of last year when Lokonga looked a little overawed at things. So he came in and he did fine, and I think that he's certainly capable of doing it, and he's a guy that's comfortable getting 1,000 minutes at that spot. So I think that's kind of where we're at right there in that situation.
That makes a lot of sense. I've got 2 questions for you towards the end of this now. What's your opinions on the manager?
So for the longest time, I don't think I was sold either way. I think that it was a bit of there was a lot of ups and downs, I think, early on in Arteta's career, right? So it was really hard to come to a firm conclusion. I was never like Arteta out, and I was never like one of like the guys that goes and fights you if you say anything bad about Arteta on the internet. I've done, because it's like I think I've had praise for what Arteta has done, and then I've had criticism for him. But I think I'm kind of coming down more into, I think a lot of this rests on what happened and the middle part of the season, where I think we finally saw how he wants to play. And I think that really kind of sold me on, all right, we will see a team that can press, that can possess, that really is good at controlling space and pushing teams back. We saw some really fun attacking movements, and you got to see the players starting to understand a little bit about the positioning that they're able to do. I think that it's just really becoming clear how he wants to play, and he's getting players that are giving him the freedom to be able to go do what he wants to do. I think one of the things that's become apparent is like, so when we're in the attacking phase of the ball, you'll see a line of 5 attackers filling up each one of, the lanes. And then you have the 3 support guys. And I think it's just really interesting to kind of think through all the different guys that we can put in all those spots. And I think it's fun to now start thinking about the permutations for what Arsenal can do. And I think that's where Arteta is finally kind of at now. It's like, all right, I finally have a squad that feels like I can implement my ideas. So I think that's where I'm at right now, where it's like, I'm pretty well sold that I think that there's something there with Arteta. I'm excited about him, but there's still big questions, right? Like, now that we've seen a lot of investment, we've seen flashes of a good team. Now we need to go out there and see it for a longer period of time, a sustained level of good performances, and really kind of start challenging for the things that we'd actually expect as Arsenal.
I mean, honestly, I agree with every word you said about Arteta. I feel there's too much of a rush to, I'm in, I'm out, I'm out, I'm in. And there's been times this season he could have been sacked. He might have been sacked at other clubs without the luxury and things. Maybe potentially Emre would have been judged harsher. As you said, there's times you can see it. And I like what he's doing. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily convinced wholeheartedly, but I'm more convinced than I'm not convinced we're moving in the right direction.
Yep.
And, as you just alluded to, money's been spent. People have been given new contracts. He's not a head coach. He's the manager. And I just believe you've got to take the rough with the smooth. All the plaudits, well deserved when it's going right. As long as it doesn't go past a certain period, you deserve a lot of criticism. We can't always run to the players. The players are one thing, but who's putting them out there? I really like Arteta. And as you said, there's been a lot of good things. And in the same way, we've got a number of young players, some are more consistent than others. Arteta is, in a managerial way, he's a baby, really. This
Right.
is a
Yeah, very much so.
So yeah, he's going to make a lot of mistakes, really. So I fully agree with you. My last question to you would be, with everything considered then, what would you consider a good season? This time next year, we're looking back at the season that's to come. What would you consider a good year? A progressive year, better yet?
Yeah, so I think this is one that, so I like to think about things that are within the club's control. So for me, it's targeting performance over necessarily a place in the table, because there'll be times where, obviously, getting to the Champions League is obviously a goal, but that's something that depends on what the other teams around you do. You kind of go back and look at, the points totals needed for fourth place, and it varies quite a bit. Like, so if Arsenal go and put up a 77-point season, but they come in fifth place, I don't know, 77 points almost always gets you fourth place. But if some fluke thing happens, right?
Basically.
Right. So it's I'm much more concerned about the performances. And for me, it's trying to get to the level of where you'd kind of think the average third, fourth place team has been over the last 4 or 5 years. So that's me seeing Arsenal challenge for 75, 80 goals. That's them, being able to have a plus 30, plus 40 goal difference. So, really kind of going 80 goals, 40 allowed. I think that would be a really good target. I want to see us really kind of possess the ball. So I want to see us increase that possession. I want to see us really kind of constrict the space that other teams are able to move. So I want us to have more final third possession with better pressing. So I think those ones are things that I really want to be able to see, because to me, it's obviously we all want to see us win and do those things. But if I'm going to get up at 4:00 in the morning, I want to see a team that's fun and exciting and does cool things. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with Arsenal, is I liked the way that we played. So to me, that's where I want to see the team go. So I want to see really good performances sustained for the whole season. And I want it. So to me, it's it'd almost be a disappointment. So if for some stupid reason Arsenal get fourth place, but we only get 60 points or something like that, to me, that's almost a failure, right? Yeah,
it's papering over cracks, and
we got into the Champions League, but it wasn't because we performed well, right? And that's where I would have concerns. That goes back to some of the Emery stuff, right? So Emery's teams got a good point total. We almost got top four, but it's there was all sorts of red flags that the performances weren't there, right? So to me, that's why I judge things a lot more on the performances, and I think that I haven't been this excited for an Arsenal team in a long time. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to, and I think the performances will match our expectations. So I'm really looking forward to the season.
I mean, like you said it there, I couldn't add a single thing to that. I agree word for word with exactly what you said. The only thing I would want to see is a bit more level-headedness, because I just feel there's when we're, as you said, the middle season, when we're winning, when everything's going great, I look at some players, I'm like, bloody hell, I never knew you had that in your locker. Likewise, on the flip side, when things aren't necessarily going right, it's only the same 2-3 players that stand up to be counted. I just want us to, when things are going well, just calm down. When things are not going well, don't think you're bad players. Just be a bit level-headed. Heaviness, and I just want us to game management and street smartness. It comes with experience, obviously, but I just feel while they're young, you've played enough games. If it doesn't matter if I'm 12 or 40. If I put my hand in some fire and I get burnt, fair enough. If I put it again and again and again and again, who do I start to blame? It feels like we do things like that. And ironically, Granit Xhaka is one that actually speaks about it. I remember after the United game, he was like, we need to be a bit more street smart. So it's the players recognize it. As you know, obviously in life, like in football, it's very difficult to make changes. I don't think anyone wants to fail on purpose and all of these sort of things. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I think this summer's been good. Obviously, your stateside, you've seen what we've been doing. I like the interviews from Edu. I like the money being spent from the Cronkies. I like the way Arteta, the players, and everyone, they're being very clear in what we're doing, in what we're saying. Like, they're talking about trophies, they're talking about top four. Last season, I don't think Edu said anything wrong in that famous interview, but he left too much air for interpretation. And as you know, when you do that, people are going to say several other things. So I agree with everything you said, and this has been a fantastic chat, man. Scott, let them know where they can find you. Obviously, your information will all be in the descriptions and things on YouTube, but
find you, man. All right. So on Twitter, I am O_that_crab. I do a bunch of writing on crabstats.xyz. So the .com wasn't available. So I went with something crazy out of left field. I do writing at Arseblog News, and then you'll also hear me talking on the Arsenal Vision podcast.
So yeah, taking all of them people, especially his articles, man, the crab stat stuff it's actually an eye opener, man. That was the first thing that attracted me to want to speak to you, because you pull it in a way that is very understandable. And I think we live in a day and age where people like a lot of jargon, and it just doesn't make sense. You really do a great job at it, man. It's a pleasure to read them. Don't stop them. But you heard the man. Any last word? In fact, last question. Where's Arsenal finishing in the league next year? I know it's an impossible one. That's why I asked you.
I think, you know what, I'm kind of high on the preseason performances, thinking that this is the team. I think there's a good chance that Arsenal get third, right? I think that there's a good possibility. I think that Chelsea are a little vulnerable. I think there's the potential for Spurs to Spurs. So I think that the third place, St. Totteringham's Day, I think that's certainly in the cards.
I mean, I've always said, I'm going to be optimistic. Ask me before the season starts. I'm going to say fourth. I think we can finish as high as fourth or as low as eighth, because I just feel, as you kind of said, I want us to kind of watch ourselves, because no matter how good or bad other teams are, I think there's an element of we always shoot ourselves in the foot, whether it's a running of games, whether it's on the field, whether it's, even on the best of days, we're dominating sides and then we concede. So I'm just kind of thinking inwards. And I think Mikel and the club are indirectly thinking of that. So it's all good stuff, man. But Scott, it's been amazing for this. Sorry to keep you 11 extra minutes, really. It's been amazing.
No worries. It's been fun conversation. I love it.
Come on, people. So yeah, his information will be in the description. Make sure you're following on Twitter, on all the websites and things like that. I've always got time for great Arsenal fans. Love to have you on again. But for now, people, we're out, man. Peace. Take care.
There's always that active red line.
I think it's like